There's this moment, easy to miss, where your power either comes through or it leaves you. And it really doesn't matter how empowered you feel going into it. It's this microsecond right before you say what you actually want to say. Leading up to that moment, you might have waffled, telling yourself you didn't know what you wanted. You might, that maybe now wasn't the time to address it, or any number of things that we tell ourselves all leading up before we just know. But I'm talking about the moment after all of that, when you're actually in the conversation or the situation, and then what unfolds from there. By the way, this also is relevant when it's a moment that was unexpected, meaning you didn't even prepare for it. It wasn't initiated by you, and it happened, right? It's happening now. And in that exact micro moment, you can feel it if you slow down enough. It's that this thought is already here. It's fully formed. You're clear, you're direct, you're honest. You know what you want to say. And then you go to open your mouth and something shifts and your eyes maybe dart, or your breath tightens and your voice gets really high, and maybe your shoulders adjust, maybe even your body collapses or getting small. By the way that your body, your breath, your eyes behave, they aren't random. They actually form in 4 direct patterns, and we have those patterns mapped for you. These patterns have been mapped over decades of working with real people under pressure, and we have it consolidated into a really cool 15 question quiz. You can take that down below in the descriptions. It's called the Somatic Skins Quiz, and it will give you direct access to what your eyes do, what your breath does, what your body does, and these patterns under pressure. So you can definitely go take that. But my point is, your body is responding to pressure in that moment. And even before the words leave your mouth, something has already been altered in the you that you're bringing to that moment, the actual power that you can express. And so by the time that you speak, it's actually no longer even the thing that you intended to say, or you're saying it in kind of a weird way, non-verbally. It's been softened or reshaped, or it's wrapped in language that makes it easier to deliver, but less true in impact. It doesn't land. And that right there is one of the clearest tells you have that, regardless of how much empowerment work you have done or how you felt going in, it's a tell on how much real power is being expressed by you. And by the way, this transcends beginner or advanced, or I've been doing this work for a long time, or no. I have these moments, even still, even after years of doing this work, and I celebrate when those moments where I collapse, or I go sideways, or I compromise. I celebrate those moments because they reveal another edge of truth to expand into, another chain of an old way or an identity that's just ready to be released. And so once you start paying attention and you realize these body tells that you have, you'll start seeing them places, and they're incredibly specific to you. So they'll show up in the way that your gaze drops at exactly the moment where it needs to stay steady, or the way that your body subtly contracts or kind of shifts sideways just to fit a space or not create waves in a way that is, you're feeling like you have to. It might show up in the rigidity of your movements, or the way that you present as guarded or super serious, and where everything looks controlled but is slightly held back. There's something that you're not fully allowing through. So I love watching for tells, for myself, for our prestige members, because in those tells are opportunities like seeds to reclaim power. And by the way, you can just hear this just as clearly in the way that people speak. There's a whole language of softening. It shows in the nonverbal body and the energy, but it also creeps into language when expression starts to break down. So things like, this might be weird, or I hope this makes sense, or I mean, I don't know if this is right, but, and suddenly a clean statement is something that needs like approval from the other person before it can even exist as legitimate. So even the tone shifts where a statement can land as a statement at the end lifts as if it's asking for permission to be valid. None of this is random, and none of it is just personality, like how I am, in the way that people assume that it is. These are patterned responses, and they reveal exactly where your system is disconnecting from power. Under certain conditions, with certain people, or in certain roles. So you might be really completely clear and direct with one person, and then find yourself hesitating or filtering with someone else. You might lead effortlessly in one environment, and then you feel yourself like tighten up or kind of show yourself the door in another. So the surface or the context looks different, but underneath, it's the same mechanism showing up again and again. And the most common answer to this experience, to this challenge, is that you need more empowerment. And this is where it's easy to get pulled into then the wrong direction, because the dominant message you hear is that the solution then of more empowerment, it lives in how you feel. So you're told that if you could just feel more confident, or you could feel more empowered, more certain, then everything would shift, and you start chasing that state. So you look for ways to generate confidence, to get yourself in the right mindset, to build a feeling that says, now I've got it and I can show up the way that I want to. And for a brief moment, it can feel like that works. So you might feel more open or more energized or more capable, and it gives you a sense that you've unlocked something. But the problem is that the feeling, just like weather, it comes in and it goes out. So the feeling tends to not hold when it matters most. We don't rise to the occasion. We fall to our current level of training. That's the default. So as soon as there is real pressure, real stakes, real pushback, a real consequence of some sort attached to what you're about to say or do, your state of being becomes an unreliable measure, because it'll fluctuate and it'll drop or it'll disappear, and then you're left trying to recreate that state of being or that feeling state in a moment that doesn't give you the space to do that. And you'll end up in this cycle where your access to power is dependent on whether or not you can generate a feeling on demand. And that's a really unstable place to build from. I would like to introduce the distinction between feeling empowered and expressing power. That's the whole point of this video, because feeling empowered is still just a state, and all states are contingent. They're influenced by your environment, your physiology, your stress levels that day, your history with the person in front of you or who they remind you of in your past, and 100 other variables that you don't fully control in that moment. They have influence on you. What actually determines your impact has very little to do with whether or not you feel more empowered. It has everything to do with whether you can express that power. Expression is different. Expression is observable. It's not imaginary. It's what actually comes through your body, your voice, your timing, your presence in real time, especially when there's something at stake. So it's whether you can carry a thought all the way through your system and let it land cleanly without distorting it on the way out. It's whether your body can remain organized enough to support what you're saying or the direction you're moving, instead of subtly pulling you out of it or diluting it or diverting it in some way. It's whether or not your patterns hold or collapse the moment there's friction. The tells that you've been overlooking in your breath, your body, your eyes, and the language you use, those tells are the exact places where that expression of power breaks down. They're the moments when the signal of who you actually are gets lost in transit, where something inside your system decides to intervene and keep you safer, and it adjusts the message before it reaches the outside world. Over time, those adjustments become so familiar that you stop questioning them. It just feels like a part of who you are, rather than something your system learned to do under specific conditions or internal belief constructs. But that distinction matters, because if it was just a learned pattern, patterns are trainable. And this is where the work actually begins, because instead of trying to manufacture a feeling, you start paying attention to exact points of interruption. You start noticing where your breath specifically changes or where your structure shifted, where your attention moves from the thing you're about to say and where it goes instead. And you start to see the exact moment where you leave yourself. And once you see it, you can begin to train it differently. And this is exactly what we do in our events within the Prestige as simulations. We bring people to these points of disruption so they can see the breakdown of these patterns and then train them differently. And those events mirror events in their real world too, because we build this for them. This is fantastic news, because you can train your ability to stay with a truth or an expressive current all the way through, to let sentences land the way they are meant to hold your gaze instead of abandoning it, to allow your body to remain open instead of collapsing into something more familiar or less effective. You don't have to become louder, and you don't have to become more forceful. Those are myths. It's actually more about becoming coherent. The most coherent in the room holds the influence. And that's actually what makes this expression of you come out into the world without getting diluted. Most of the moments that matter, they're not dramatic. They're small, everyday interactions where something is on the line, even something small, even if it's subtle. It's that kind of follow-up that you don't send. It's where you want to set a boundary, but you don't, or you want to hold a standard, but you don't, or you have an idea, but then you kind of hold back and think about it some more. Or the conversation where you almost say what you mean, but not quite. These are the micro moments where power is either expressed and therefore compounds over time, or it's lost. When your system learns to stay with these moments instead of pulling away from them or contorting, everything about how you show up and how your impact is felt begins to change. You become someone whose presence carries weight, whose words land clean, whose decisions reflect what's actually true rather than just what feels safest in the moment. You trust you, and therefore others trust you. And people feel that immediately, even if they can't explain why, because you activate them. They feel the difference between someone who is, trying to feel powerful and someone whose system can actually carry power through expression. That difference is everything. So, I invite you, be about your life today. Notice your own tells in this. Start to see where specifically your signal of power breaks, or it softens, or it gets rerouted sideways somehow. That's the doorway into this deeper work. But seeing awareness isn't training. And I want you to have this in your true body and mind. So the ability to express and move with power in ways that matter, this is exactly what we train. Inside the Prestige, our Applied Somatics Academy, we're not teaching you how to think differently about power. We're training your body to actually carry it. We coach the mind through the body so that under pressure in real moments, your structure, your breath, your attention, these nonverbals, they stay organized enough for you to express verbally and non-verbally what's real without losing yourself in the process. So, if you're ready to stop the empowerment work and stop chasing the feeling and start building the capacity to show up with consistency, with clarity, with impact, I might even call it like intimacy with power, then join us. Join us in the Prestige. Join us for the fall season. We're having conversations about it now, depending on when you're watching this video. Because at some point, all of this, your own growth, your own potential, potency of impact, it stops being about whether you can understand or access power in theory. And it starts being about whether you can express it when it counts. And we need people like that. So that's the work we're doing. If that resonates with you, reach out to join us. Otherwise, stay tuned here and consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel out a lot, and I'll see you next time.